Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Hello, friends. Hello. Welcome to Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're thrilled to be back. Thank you, everyone, for your nice well wishes on my back injury. I had the audacity to get up from the dinner table, and my back said no. So I was late. I thought about changing my graphic behind me to the picture of the president from Buckaroo Banzai, where he's like laid up in traction the entire movie. I'm like, I should have done the show last week like that.
Our fans like a good Buckaroo Banzai.
So
you would hope.
Yeah, but we are back, and my back is back, and we're thrilled to be joining you now that we are into October. Fall is we are fully into fall now, and
at least around here it really is. It's the air has changed, and
yeah. And do you remember, dear listener, do you remember how we did that show where we talked about all the movies that were going to come out this fall, and how, hey, everything can change, everything can change, but this is what's scheduled. And we're
even
excited.
when we said that, we didn't think everything would change. We thought a lot of things would.
Because literally every movie on that list has been moved now. Yeah. So we're gonna need you, dear listener, to just like put a pin in it, and then sometime we're just gonna go, hey, remember that episode we recorded back in September of 2020? Play it now. And so that's your homework, dear listener, since we're all back to school. That's your homework, is to just table that epised. And we'll come back.
Or if we run out of ideas, maybe we'll just get sneaky and do that whole episode.
That's true.
Notices.
Yeah, that would be great.
Shuffle the order around a little bit.
Brand new show, everybody. Brand new. Make no mind of the references. It was a game that Ryan and I were playing.
You never know. We do like our games.
Yeah. So today we are going to talk about the film career, mostly film. We'll delve into some other stuff, I'm sure, but the career of a great British actor who we lost back in, I want to say June. Yes, back in June of this year, Sir Ian Holm.
Yeah.
Sir
He's
Ian.
just one of my favorite actors of all time, and I have a lot of favorites. That's a big list, but truly, he was absolutely on the list, so it's exciting. It's sad he's gone, but it's very cool to look back at his list as a sort of final thing and just see how accomplished and how kind of amazing it was. And we're definitely going to have fun celebrating that today.
Yeah. Really terrific guy. A guy who could play the gamut of different types of characters, from villains to heroes to so this will be, and obviously an incredibly long career, not a Shelley long career, but in longevity,
right.
But so that'll be fun. So we're going to do a countdown on that. First I feel, oh God, Ryan, I'm terribly sorry, I feel like there was something else that we were going to mention before we jumped into our countdown. There? Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. I'm going to blame my back on this one.
I can't think of anything.
Okay, well, we talked about all the movies being moved, and
such as we can, the world of movies. It's a weird time. We thought maybe, since they were waiting till the last second, and since Tenet actually came out and some other things, that maybe they were just going to start releasing this stuff, but
Yeah.
I'm relieved that for the most part they didn't. The medium movies are all getting farmed out to streaming services, and
Mm-hmm.
or those partnerships are being honored. But the big films with big stars and stuff, they were all bumped,
Mm-hmm.
and that's probably as it should be. I think
Mm-hmm.
the next, if you to just talk about this to its end, I think the next question now is, we didn't include a ton of these, but a handful of them on that list. Oscar movies, how they're gonna honor this year in movies, and how they're gonna just do any of that ceremony. Yeah. That's the next step, because even if there's a lot of good news, and hopefully there is, from a COVID standpoint, just waiting for us right around the corner, it's still going to take months after that for any probably things will never be what we consider normal again, but any sort of normalcy,
right,
to be returned to. It's a long ways off, no matter what happens.
As we have often talked about in our other lives, as you know, and in theater and stuff, the arts are always one of the last things to come back, because it takes expendable income to be able to go to it. It's it's not something that can just that people jump right back into right away. And also because I think because these streaming services have.
I didn't watch the Emmys. How did they do that?
It was essentially it was virtual. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel was on a stage, and they did have some people in person, not accepting awards, but presenting.
So they could control every element of the live presentation.
And then they did. So that they had actually, and this is brilliant. I loved this. They had people at every location, wherever anybody was, whether they were in an apartment or like the whole Schitt's Creek cast was in this giant outdoor tent thing, having a party where they had been isolating in preparation for this. But they the Academy, the Emmys had people in hazmat suits, but the hazmat suits were decorated like tuxedos, and they had Emmys there, so that and they just stood there, and they if they won, then they got the word, go ahead and go in and give them the award. If you were one of the people in the hazmat suit that at a place where they did win, you literally turned around and left. And some of the nominees, like this, I can't remember who it was, but they tweeted or Instagrammed a picture out saying, "Hey, this is what happens when you don't win." And it's the person in the hazmat suit outside like the screen door, just going, "Hi," and then bye, and then they left. I know that a couple things, like for the late night talk show hosts,
mm-hmm.
they had these boxes delivered. And they apparently there was an Emmy in only one of them. And like when they announced it, then someone was going to hit a button and this Emmy was going to explode out of this box. And so then when John Oliver won it, suddenly
that's a category you could do that with, because Oliver's won every year since he's been on the air, and no one else has won, and they all know they're not going to.
Yeah, so then this weird robot hand just bursts out of this box with confetti and with an Emmy in its hand.
I saw a still of that on his show. So
it was very weird, and so they did. Hey, that's something we've talked about a lot in the arts community, is people seeing what they can do with this medium of video conferencing and trying to figure out how to present entertainments in some way, utilizing this form that we all have to use right now, in terms of trying to do live events or semi-live events, or it's all really tricky. But we're also fortunate, I guess, to live in a time where where our communications network is such where we can do a lot of stuff on a relatively instantaneous basis. So that's,
we're certainly reaping the benefits of that right now.
Yeah. I do finally remember what it is. I was going to tease a little bit our upcoming super mega Halloween-ish themed shows that we have coming up. We have something special in store that should be a lot of fun. It could be just absolute chaos, but we think it's going to be a lot of fun. And that's coming. That'll be a couple-parter coming towards the end of this month as we get closer to what my son's most important holiday of the year, and that's Halloween.
A lot of people's.
Yeah. So
we celebrate it with 2 or 3 episodes a year, and this year will be no different.
Yep.
I'm going to watch a ton of movies. I wish I could be disciplined enough to watch them for y'all in September so that I could be telling you now which scary movies you should watch, because that would be useful. But since there's just not enough of you to warrant that sort of breaking my routine, I'm not going to. But our post-Halloween show really is going to be that one we can say what it is. We're going to leave the other 2 a surprise, because why not?
It'll be.
Why not drum up interest in any sort of way we can? So it is fun. We've got a fun October lined up, even if our first show in October doesn't end up existing. Hang with us.
Right.
We planned a lot of cool stuff from now to the end of the year, really.
This should be a lot of fun, and hopefully the year will continue to just sort of get a little we hope that the year continues on an upslope, that we're not I guess not COVID wise. We don't want the COVID line on an upslope, maybe the COVID line on a downslope, and our lives kind of getting back into. That's a very long-winded way of me.
But we
just want things to be.
I appreciate the visual metaphor there. That makes sense. You can almost see how one would help produce the other.
Indeed. All right, so let us jump in to our talk about Sir Ian Holm Cuthbert, which is his real name. But let's jump in. We are going to do a countdown.
10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We're calling it top 10 ever Ian Holm performances, but we're going to squeeze every last movie we can.
If you've ever listened to our show before, a top 10 is never just a top 10.
Right.
It is a top 10 with a couple extra bonus morsels in there.
Yeah. I started off, when I was making this list last week, I started off with what I called a bunch of shout outs. It's been more than a week, so I don't remember what those were, but
right, we were ready to go. Ryan was ready to go when I had to text him saying, I can't do it. My back is hurting too bad.
That's all right.
So
here we are.
But yeah, we had talked about, so Sir Ian Holm, he, just performer forever, dating back to the 60s, on stage, and in
big time Royal Shakespeare Company guy.
Sure. Yep, and he, so he lived a long life. Born. I didn't realize he was even this. He was born in 31. Wow. So he. I thought he was more like born in the late 40s or something.
Well, he was never a romantic hero, so he had the benefit. I mean, I was looking for pictures, and I still technically am. So if you got any great pictures of Ian Holm, please send them to me. I was looking for, photos for the shingle for the show and for other things, and going through sort of his visual history. And, he's changed a lot. He aged a lot, but, he never felt like a young man, even in the early 70s. Yes. And he never felt like a really old man much, even when he was playing more mature characters in the aughts and beyond. So
that is a great point. He's one of those guys that literally looked the same age from about 25
or just never really he never just you didn't feel the aging with him. Part of it was the parts that he played, and part of it was just the sort of odd ducks that he played earlier in his career, where none of them were, you know what I mean? He didn't go from being the guy who saves the damsel to the sidekick to the grandpa. Like, he just and when we go through this list of roles, you'll see what we're talking about. You'll see what we're talking about. I don't want to spoil anything.
A couple, so a couple early performances that didn't make the list, but might be worthy of checking out. Robin and Marion.
Yeah, he plays King John in Robin and Marion. Robin and Marion is an old Robin Hood and an old maid Marion, played by Sean Connery and Audrey Hepburn. It's a Richard Lester movie, so sorry, baby boomers, I'm not a huge Richard Lester fan. He's just a little too gaggy and corny for me. Just never really gets to anything emotionally the way I like. But his most emotionally resonant film is this film called Robin and Marion, which Ian is definitely Robert Shaw mostly, but Ian is the really bad guy behind the bad guy in it, and he's great in it. King John's a fun role. So.
Yeah, and another named one, Nicholas and Alexandra.
Oh yeah. He's the guy who Nicholas and Alexandra, the early 70s, late 60s attempt at a big historical David Lean style epic. It doesn't work completely, but Ian basically plays a communist agent who is their babysitter when they're sent into exile. And it's a guy where he doesn't even say anything. He sort of stands there and leads them around, but there's something extra going on behind his eyes in that film, where you can just tell this guy has it. Like, he's got a whole take on this dude who's really just a statue.
Sure.
It's pretty impressive. So.
Yep. And then another film, Shout at the Devil.
Oh yeah. Roger Moore and what is it, Lee Marvin?
Is that who that? Where is Shout at the Devil here?
I want to say it's Lee Marvin. It's somebody who turned down a lot of great
movies,
Lee Marvin, but still did Shout at the Devil. That's a fun African American or African adventure.
Yeah,
that he's really funny in.
And then Juggernaut.
Juggernaut. I believe he plays either, I can't remember exactly, either a law enforcement or a corporate stooge, but a total stooge in it, who's like only there to worry about the property and the cost of everything while this bomb is ticking on this boat. We were going to talk about another Richard Lester movie, by the way. We were going to talk about that during the disaster films, boy, they were just too much disaster to talk about, so we never got to it. But Ian's, again, a little role, but a really memorable one. Yeah. Which the 60s and 70s are really full of from him.
Yeah. I was going to say that's a, and even as I'm looking ahead on our list here, that's a theme that will come up over and over again. He
graduated into big major supporting roles, but almost always a supporting player.
And when he is on screen, it is never wasted. He's just one of those guys. Yeah, he's literally going to give you something really interesting and really unique. It's one of those, and that's what part of why Ryan and I really love him, and a lot of people love him, is he's one of those guys that when his name is attached to a film, you're like, well, Ian Holm's in it, you're going to get a little something interesting at least.
Right. Even if it's the only thing.
Right. Even if
the film. We'll talk about a couple of those.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, let's start out our list then. Number 10 is the Luc Besson film Fifth Element.
Fifth Element.
Yeah,
that movie has a lot of fans. I was
going to say that movie is not divisive, but it is. There are people that, man, they swear by this movie.
It's really fun. It is. It's really super French and European sort of farcicalness married to big, North American sci-fi adventure. And those things don't super go well together, and yet it really, in the latter category, it's super unique because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the former category, it's hard to say. Ian Holm certainly gets that he's in a comedy, and his dial is turned up a little bit in it, but he really is one of only a couple of people in the whole film who is consistently playing the material and valuing it for its own sake, whereas a lot of folks are truly just showing up and being ridiculous. But fun ridiculousness from Christopher Fairbanks, from I'm just trying, Brian James, the list goes on and on. Everyone who turns up in that is having a lot of fun. And Ian's given a sort of thankless role of holding down the fort in terms of the greater mythology of the story, I guess.
Yeah.
And
he has a ton of exposition that he has to
right.
that he has to share with everybody.
Yeah. He
does
does it in a really interesting way. And he's a guy that, from the get-go, that you're in good hands with him. In that way, it's sort of boring because he's almost purely heroic in it, even though he's not the hero of the story. But he still finds a lot of fun to mine in that. Whilst in my feeling about Fifth Element is he's one of the characters by the end of the thing that you're not completely sick of, because he's
right.
You know what I mean? He's sort of doing it all the right way, which I really dig. So
yeah, I buy that. That's
I don't love Fifth Element at all.
No,
I have to say.
Fifth Element is a movie that
I do love bits of it a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. I find myself, like, if it's on, or it's not a movie that I seek out to watch, but if I see that it's on and I'm like, and then I'll watch it going, oh yeah, this part's pretty cool. And then you're watching it and then something else happens and you're like, oh yeah, okay. Then you move on to something else. But yeah, there are really interesting moments. You gotta, with a movie like that, as you said, maybe it's the French aesthetic of it. It's like, well, you're not going to get there's nothing else like Fifth Element,
right? It's not just the French. It's a French farce. It's a French identity farce.
Yeah.
That's which normally happens in a country house over the weekend. This happens on a grand scale, but it's
right.
That constant Three's Company type storyline that's somehow consistently a part of this giant evil versus good epic science fiction kind of space opera. It's both. And it really is. There's only one other movie like that the same people tried to make later, and it doesn't work at all. So you can just see, you can appreciate how tricky it was to make and how they kind of nailed it as much as you can, combining those two things. And the people like Holm that are in it, there's a couple others, but it really helped to make it work because they know what their defined roles are in sort of both worlds. And he's a knowing actor who you never catch winking at you. And that's finding that perfect line. That's not easy to do. Mm-hmm. It really isn't easy to do.
Right.
He does it with aplomb in that film.
All right. Our number 9 Ian Holm film, From Hell.
We talked about From Hell too on our.
Yes, we did.
Alan
Moore episode.
But again, he's great in From Hell. He's really good in it. It's hard to really talk too much about what his role is in that, but he's sort of a bit of a mentor for our hero.
Yep. And
the character, again, comes along with a big expositional job to do, which is not always fun. And because it's Ian Holm, he's captivating in it. You're almost sad when he goes away from the storyline, or when the storyline goes away from him.
Right.
And then because it's a mystery and because it's sort of got a lot of other things going in it, there's this extra stuff even added onto that he's got to pull off, that he pulls off really, really well. That film's, I stuck my tongue out at it just a moment ago, but From Hell is it's a really difficult, challenging source material that they just never could have done right by in a movie. So they just take the story and play it as straight as a movie as they can. But the Hughes brothers who directed it were not known for, Victorian era mysteries, or certainly not the two guys you would have picked
right
to do that at the time. That their aesthetic combined with all the great, British character actors and such that just are populated in there, combined with the Jack the Ripper lore, which for reasons we don't need to go into, we've all, humanity has been fascinated with ever since the events. It's pretty great. I mean, as far as Ripper movies go, it's one of the tip top ones, I think.
Right. Yeah, it is.
Great music, great scene design, great early digital cityscapes of old London and stuff.
And I mean, this was like Johnny Depp at the height of his, of his. Oh wait, am I gonna make my timeline off now? When was it?
Well, this was pre Pirates of the Caribbean, so he wasn't a superstar.
No, this was before.
What I like about it is it's Johnny Depp's. It's the height of his self-seriousness.
That's And
I think when all the zany Tim Burton films and all the crazy pirate films that came later, this is one where it's a little labored and a little tortured, to be fair. But I like seeing him.
Yeah.
On a grounded level, you know what I mean? It's like go back and watch.
I remember this being like, I remember as a fan of the graphic novel and everything, just going, oh yeah, no, that's a good choice, because he plays that, he plays in a moody environment very well, and so
right. There's no sense of the actual Inspector. What's his name? I can't remember the character's name.
Abilene.
Yeah. Francis Abilene?
Frederick Abilene.
Frederick Abilene. Okay. There's no sense of the historical person like there is in the graphic novel, but it's a good role by him, and it's enhanced greatly by Ian Holm's performances, which is why Ian's there. So it's more than, there's a lot of great actors of that type in it, but that Ian again comes out on top pretty much.
Yep. All right, so the next film, big switch in the type of character here, but the number 8 film we're going to talk about is Garden State. Zach Braff's first movie as his braffness started to rise with Scrubs. He wrote and directed this thing, and starred in it.
It reminds me, it's a later generation, but it reminds me of when What's-His-Face did Reality Bites in the 90s.
Ben Stiller,
Ben Stiller, yeah. And it's not like it's a work of genius, but it's a substantive story. Love it or hate it, that was revelation at the time, to see this sort of goofy comic guy tell a story that was a human one, and that sort of spoke to a generation of people. I really believe that Zach pulled something similar off with Garden State, which has some of the same problems. It's a little too clever and a little, but you so much rather it be that than bland or cliched. Garden Party's full of a bunch of delightful surprises. They're little, they're not big shocks or big twists, but lots of little surprises in storytelling from a guy who loves movies and wanted to just go a slightly different direction when you thought he was going to do something else. I don't know. I don't want to ruin any of them.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
one of the big ones was even imagining Ian in this role, and you can talk, Joel, you know the movie better than me. You can talk about the role a little bit, but what's great about it is that he imagined him in it, maybe just dreamed him in it.
Yeah.
And then asked him to do it. And Ian said yes. And it's not tantamount to Robin Williams being willing to do Good Will Hunting, which really just changed that movie completely. But it's a similar type of thing. honestly. He brings, he's not playing a character with a ton of gravitas like we've seen in other Ian Holm films up to this point. And yet he somehow brings that to the production anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's so Ian Holm plays his dad. He plays Zach Braff's character's dad, which, I mean, in the classic naming structures of especially classic theater, the character Andrew Largeman, and the father's Gideon Largeman.
Oh God!
Which, as a shout out to our old
God bless you,
college professor. College professor David Wheeler going on and on about the names in theater. Willie Low Man. He's a low man.
He's a low man.
Yeah, well, this is a large man. But anyway, so Zach Braff's plays Ian Holm plays his father, his dad, who's a shrink and is in. He's one of those classic characters where it's like he's a psychologist who clearly is in need of some therapy.
Right.
You know, where he can administer and dish out psychotherapy, but is unable to see the needs of himself and his immediate family. Can't see the forest for the trees there. So yeah, and he's he's trying to deal with, he's got his wife, Ian Holm's character's wife, or is paralyzed, and he's sort of in denial about how well, it's sort of what's interesting about it is he's sort of in denial that people can be okay with her being paralyzed, if that makes any sense. Like,
it does.
Yeah. So Zach, like Zach Braff is like, yeah, it's mom, and and he's like, no, you're not dealing with your mom's.
It does. It's a credit to Zach because he's both a total foil for our hero, which Ian knows he is, but he's also something entirely worthy on his own as a character, and that's because both of those. I'm sure that's what attracted Holm to the material, but.
Yeah, he's a foil is a great way to put it, because he's not a villain. He's not a villain. But he is working in opposite. He's working as an obstacle, as a major obstacle to the main character.
To the main character's
but
journey.
He's not he's not like this incredibly unlikable, mean person. It's not like he's a violent, abusive father.
He's just a lot to deal with.
Yeah. And he does, and he brings this wonderful. Ian Holm is has this great humanity, this great to me, when I think back on it, it's like I remember it's like there are moments where Ian Holm, his character, is listening to Zach Braff, and yet you can see he's not listening.
Right.
And to be able to convey that on screen, you're like, if you as an actor. And as a young actor at the time that this came out, I just remember kind of breaking down, stepping away from enjoying the movie or enjoying the story, and from a technical standpoint, going, "Damn, that was cool. That was cool how he just completely was not even hearing a word." Right. And I understood that from a storytelling standpoint, so based on what he was doing as a performer. So
so that's a good one.
That's another good film. And all right, so number 7. Okay, so this is this was a big giant film, and Ian Holm again talking about like the man who has to deliver all this exposition and a lot of stuff. Fellowship of the Ring.
Or the
Lord of the Rings. Yeah, the Lord of the Rings story. Yeah,
but Fellowship, where he makes his mark more than the rest, even though he appears off and on throughout. You're right about what you're saying, delivering the exposition, although I really, when you watch it, he's around for a lot of exposition. I think it's Ian McKellen that has to do most of that.
Sure, yeah, you're right.
What Ian has to do as an old Bilbo Baggins is, those films launched without a corresponding Hobbit film first. Not that but at the same time, there's such renowned stories before those movies even showed up that tons and tons, millions of people had their own ideas about who these characters were. He has to show up on page 1 of that film being this person who has this backstory, who inhabits all of the lessons and all of the idiosyncrasies. Like, it's a challenge of a role. Not just anyone could have done it as well as he does. It's a little cartoony and a little over the top, especially early in the early goings. But to me, that's what's so brilliant about it. Is if you've read those books, I don't know what it's like for someone who had never read them and was just seeing Bilbo for the first time at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring in the theater. But for people who had a history with that character, knew who he was, knew whatever. I mean, it was just, it was pow, bam, he's there right in front of your eyes, and you believe it completely. And I would think that even if you don't know what he's conveying, that you still benefit from the sense of how completely realized he is on screen with very little to no setup at all. That's, to me, what's so great about that. Then when he reappears later in the story in more meaningful ways, it all just continues to pay off with, and he's been given none of the tools that you normally are in a movie of this type to get there, and he really helps that film get there.
Sure.
So to me, that's why this, even though it's kind of small, much smaller relative to the rest of the content of those movies, gets on the list, because it's not just anyone really truly could have done that. Matter of fact, it's really tough to think of many actors. He really is perfect for that part at that time in a way that I can't think of many others that would have been.
To me, his Bilbo Baggins and how it's played at the beginning of that first film, it's something that what Ian Holm is so, one of the things he's really good at is he can be both playful and menacing in the exact same moment, and capture that. And there's a little bit of that obviously in that Bilbo Baggins character as pertains to the ring. He's just this delightful, fun character. And then also at the same time, though, there are these little moments that Peter Jackson's able to capture with Ian Holm where he's this delightful character, and yet you just see the menace or the darkness of everything that has happened prior to this film. You see it in there,
and everything that's been working on him.
And it's great. And it's great as a way to kick off this new adventure that we're about to go on with Frodo. It's like you see all, if you don't have any sense, if you, like you said, if you didn't read the books or if you didn't know any of the stories or The Hobbit before seeing Fellowship of the Ring, well, then it's like, well, this is going to be a very unexpected journey. So
no pun intended. You're exactly right. It has all of that in it in a very short period of time. It conveys a ton of information, and yet there's this living, breathing, believable Bilbo on screen for you. Tolkien, he abandoned this idea early on, but the idea was, even for the Lord of the Rings films, was sort of to continue the adventures of Bilbo. And I think he realized that character, as he wrote him, as he realized he was going to be telling a totally different kind of story, that he needed a sort of different stand-in character for him. That's where Frodo comes from, I think, rightfully. And it's cool too, because it becomes a generational story, which they all are. Really great. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to think of. We got a few things coming up here later on the list with his Shakespeare and whatnot, but it's hard to imagine a character with that audience has such a built-in idea of what they are, having to show up on screen in none of his big character moments throughout the story, and still just sort of hit it. And that he does completely.
And another thing that you said that I feel like that needs to be reiterated that he does this in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And that's and again that's a
very
gift.
little screen time, and yet really super important character.
Yep.
And his stewardship of that character in those films is it's hard to imagine a single note of it being better. So it really is a great performance, even if it seems a little silly.
Yeah. And now speaking of, you mentioned Shakespeare, and of course, as an actor, Sir Ian Holm, started out as primarily a Shakespearean actor with the RSC, and so knows his way around the Bard very, very well. And in 2 years' time, I mean, in '89 and '90, he was in two big Shakespearean films. In '89, in our personal favorite, Henry V.
Yeah, but let's start with the
the 90. Yeah, the big. I mean, Hamlet was a big film. Yeah. I mean, that was a highly anticipated, just a film that everyone was. Mel Gibson as Hamlet.
And we in the States experienced those two movies roughly the same time, because the '89 the 90 Hamlet, I don't know, the '89 Henry V, Kenneth Branagh, which we've talked about on the show a few times before, took its time to sort of reach a wide audience. It started very small, started in England, came over to America in art house theaters, came out on video, all that stuff kind of had to snowball like movies like that would. Zeffirelli, who famously directed the Romeo and Juliet version in the early '70s.
Yeah.
His next Shakespeare project, this was a big deal. It had a fairly decent stars for the time. It's very famous. Everybody calls it Mel Gibson's Hamlet, because Mel Gibson plays Hamlet in it. And other than being age inappropriate for Hamlet, but you can hardly, look at the Hamlets through the ages. It is one of those characters where you're really kind of a 19-year-old, but there are very few 19-year-olds on the planet that anyone has felt at any given time could actually take on that role.
Yeah.
Because it's I don't think I'm overstating it when I say, in terms of male leading roles in Shakespeare, it's the role. Hamlet.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing, when you're a young man, you want to play Hamlet. When you're an old man, you want to play Lear. That's
right. Mel Gibson's a middle-aged man who plays Hamlet like a young man.
Yeah,
it's very watchable and very fun.
Yeah,
I mean, I really think he's excellent in the part. We used to, at the time, we compared it to some guy I was reading some article was like, I think Kevin Costner should have played Hamlet and Mel Gibson should have played Robin Hood. If we could go back last year, we'd do a quick swap of those guys, because one of them's playing Robin Hood like Hamlet, and the other one's playing Hamlet like Robin Hood. He's not unhinged or off the wall. He's got that melancholy, but Mel knows deep down that he can do whatever he wants with Hamlet, because the people are going to say what they're going to say, whether he nails it or not. Yeah. And there's a liberating feeling to watching him on screen in that role. Also has Glenn Close in it. Also has Helena Bonham Carter in it. Alan Bates.
Paul Scofield.
Incredible Paul Scofield. Yeah. Stephen Delane is my favorite on-screen. Horatio.
In that movie,
yeah, it's full of really good people in these well-known parts. One of the more famous, although it's rather thankless part, is Polonius, right? That's the character's name, played by Ian Holm. And there's a I don't know what it's, the places you'll go of Shakespeare. that Polonius has. It's one of Shakespeare's most purple speeches, because of how encouraging it is. If admittedly by the end of the film, ironically encouraging. And Holm is great in Hamlet because he plays this guy with this innocence and his sort of his fate then is really a bummer and sets off these events probably, if you study Hamlet, have all been set off from the beginning, but to me, it's like the turning point of Hamlet. There's no going back after we find out what happens to Polonius, and it's really well done by him. The reason I pick him, the reason the listed performance of his is Henry V, Captain Llewellyn, which is not as important a role in not as famous a story, still a pretty famous one, but not as famous as Hamlet.
Right.
There's no speech in it that, you know what I mean? But he's, it's hard to explain how great he is in that film.
Mm-hmm.
He's, again, it's that layers that Joel's talking about when he talks about what he's doing in Garden State. He's playing a guy who's a true believer, who is acting like a commanding cynic amongst his soldiers to motivate them, essentially.
Yeah.
There's multiple layers to it, and when we see the loyal servant and good friend come out at the movie, it's this unsheathing of a character that has been very uptight up until this point.
Yeah.
I love that. I really love that portrayal of him. Of course, I love Henry V.
Mm-hmm.
Unimpeachably. I love almost everything about it. It's just fantastic. And in a role that I haven't seen many versions of Henry V before that one. So this is my introduction to this character. But I just don't think, I'd be surprised if when you're putting your ensemble of Henry V together, that, especially in a movie, that an actor of his quality is a guy who's getting cast in that part, that
right.
far down the pecking order of characters in that
right.
show.
Right. Right before the show, Ryan and I were talking about this story that he and I happened to be a part of, that we witnessed, of a production of Camelot many, many years ago. And
someday we'll tell you the whole story.
Yeah, someday we'll.
More time.
Well, the one of the things that Ryan brought up is there was this young woman who was in the ensemble of this show, and she was far and away the most intense and dedicated person to that story. When she marched, she was marching. When she was listening, she was listening, and she was there.
When she was general murmuring, she was generally murmuring in all caps.
Yeah, and I say, you know, and it was, but not in a inappropriate way. She was just dead. I mean, it was border.
She stood out as a background player with no lines in every scene she was in. That's not 100% appropriate.
Yeah, sure, that's not.
Don't get me wrong.
But her
dedication
was
to
genuine.
What she was doing, her commitment to what she was doing.
I say that to say that in Henry V, Ian Holm, there's a couple moments in the film where Ian Holm, and then Brian Blessed is also another one, when they're in the background of some scenes and they are so intensely listening and so focused and so in the room, in the moment with that you, as an ensemble person, as an audience member watching the ensemble, you get that energy. You get that these guys are all in on Henry. They are full, you know,
and those are really the two characters. I think it's Ian Holmes and Blessed hardly does anything in the movie. They even cast him as the messenger, which is usually played by a different guy, just so that let's do something with Brian Blessed. He's here.
Brian Blessed here,
so and it's great. His messenger, is excellent. They do back him up. They have his back. They have our hero's back. And that's not always the most interesting character to watch, but these two guys are just, you know, and in a sense you get the feeling they have Branna's back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then it's that, and it's that gravitas that the two of them, Ian Holm and Brian Blessed, that gravitas that presence that they can have on a screen. So when you see that that presence, that energy directed at Branagh, at Henry,
I shouldn't take the time to do this, but my favorite story, it's from Kenneth Branagh's biography that he wrote right before Dead Again came out. He jokes in the foreword about you just shouldn't be writing a biography when you're 31 years old or whatever. But this is all meant to help pay for this work that I've been doing.
Yeah.
And apparently people want to know about this. So here you go. My favorite story from the set of that is Paul Scofield again. They're doing that messenger scene I'm telling you about, and the whole French court is there, and Branagh's not in it. He's out. He plays Henry V in it, the movie, but he's out of costume and just directing on the day. And he, at the end of the rehearsal period in the first couple of takes, he gives out these, this 29-year-old guy gives out these notes to these dudes in the French court. And it clearly is really self-conscious about it. And Blessed, he goes, what are you doing? What are you doing? Paul Scofield has deigned to appear in your stupid movie and you're giving him notes? You should be on your hands and knees and licking his bloody boots. And apparently that performance by Blessed, everybody laughs, everyone's at ease now. The thing that might have been causing tension has become a big joke.
Yep.
That really is the definition of having somebody's back. You're taking care of him in a moment of weakness.
Yeah.
That's what Captain Fluellen and the Duke of Exeter do in Henry V, and it's awesome. And I love it. I love Fluellen. I lean to him more because Blessed's so bluster and such presence. Fluellen's this more like what you'd think Ian would be. He's this quirky, weird guy who is easy to set off, but is just loyal like a sheepdog. And I love that role of his. I just think I didn't know it was him when I was watching it. I'm like, I didn't recognize it. That was the guy from this and this and this.
Right.
It's like a totally different kind of dude that I'd seen him be before, and I loved that.
So let's move on. So next up we have a couple more really British, really films.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Brazil, but first, before we talk about Brazil, let's talk about the other movie.
About Time
Bandits. Yeah, which is a personal.
You pick.
Yeah.
These are here because we love these both.
Yeah.
So it's not really like Time Bandits didn't make the list, but Brazil did. But if I had to pick, I guess that's what I would do. Mm-hmm. The beauty and the miracle of movies is that you don't have to pick. You get to have both. And his Napoleon. Thinking about, no, bring back the little people fighting. I want to see that.
Yeah. It's that one.
It's a gross, mean-spirited British caricature of what Napoleon would be, but it doesn't matter. It's so blatantly entertaining and hilarious.
Yeah, to me, that's one of those comic assassin moments where he just comes out and his idea, he just comes out with a bold take on it and just slays and murders, and then that's it.
And then he's gone for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. It's really, really great. I like Brazil better because even though the bureaucrat that he plays in Brazil is less blatantly funny, he just plays this guy who's this big bundle of nerves and terror, who has a very real sense of the world that he's in. And I think a lot of the characters we meet early on, especially our hero, who sort of has lived a life of privilege, and even though things are going wrong all around him, it takes him a while to get it. Mm-hmm. And Ian Holm plays this other dude who he gets it. He's an inch away from the Gestapo coming in and taking him to who knows where, and it could happen as a result of a clerical error. That's the plot of Brazil, essentially. He's playing a character who lives in that reality every moment, and it should be more like Napoleon, where it's just this wacky, zany thing, and yet there's a real pathos, and you really sort of feel for the guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's needed in that movie. And I don't think a ton of it is on the page, quite frankly. I really do think that's a fully realized performance from him that isn't even maybe necessary,
right?
That you get for free because you cast him.
Yeah. Because you put this role and obviously just trusted him to go and create.
He's really good in it, as good as he is in anything.
Yeah.
I don't know that like I said, the part maybe isn't as worthy as some of the ones further up on our list, but Ian Holm in Brazil it's my favorite performance in Brazil. A movie that's packed to the rafters with all kinds of incredibly great stuff.
Right.
I would say he's probably my favorite. Catherine Hellman's probably my second favorite. And that might be true, although to a lesser degree for Time Bandits.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Maybe that one's harder to
Time
pick.
Bandits. God,
Time Bandits is
I got to revisit Time Bandits again.
Time Bandits is a parade of cameos, so it's harder to judge the same way you do Brazil, which really does have there's a meaning behind the whole thing that is absent from Time Bandits and Munchausen a couple years later.
Right.
But good Lord, yeah. I mean, we shouldn't be telling you anything you don't know. If you haven't seen that trilogy of Terry Gilliam fantasies, you need to see them all. You have to see them.
Yeah, they're really special films.
They are a little hard to take by today's standards. They're mean-spirited films, truly. They're a little hard to take, but they represent a cruelty about humanity that it very much exists, and they examine that while keeping you awkwardly laughing throughout. And I think that's, very worthy, truly.
Yeah.
We'll talk more on our Gilliam top 10.
At some point we'll get into this.
We'll get way into one.
All right. So next up is The Madness of King George. Man,
oh my goodness.
Have
you seen The Madness of King George?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Love that film. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This everyone in that.
This was a movie.
Holy
this was a
cow.
movie. I will say Madness of King George is a movie. It came out, we were, because we were in college and I was reviewing movies at that point, and it came out, but it didn't come up to the Fargo Moorhead area until after the Academy Awards.
The year I was reviewing movies, the best, well, I don't want to say the best two, but one of the best movies of the year and one of the highest praised movies of the year, Dead Man Walking and Honeymoon in Vegas. I couldn't see either of those until the following year. Yeah. So they were the big hyped movies going into the Oscars, and I didn't get to watch them. It bummed me out.
Yeah.
Turns out, no worries. Braveheart won all the Oscars. So
Braveheart won everything that year.
But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So and it was like, okay, this will be fun to see. And I had gotten the press packet because working for the school paper, we would
the studio sent out the press
studio. We would still get the studio press packet. So I had all this material, and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be
especially Samuel Goodwin and MGM who distributed that movie here. Mm-hmm. They always send in the coolest press packets.
They did something
for the awesomest films you can't see in Fargo Moorhead.
Indeed. I remember when. Side note, but yeah, they used to send these really, it was a lot of times it was just the folder with some stills that you could run in the paper and stuff and background information. But every once in a while they would send some sort of swag with it or whatever. And I remember, and I used to have it. I don't know if I even still do, because I used to keep all of that stuff because I had the Braveheart one. But they did a re-release of Dr. Zhivago, and one of the things they sent out was an actual film cell of one of the prints, and it was just like, what a cool little thing to send, little thing. And there was nothing special about the thing, but it was like,
but they get us.
Yeah, they
like to collect stuff.
Yeah, this is my Zhivago cell. Yeah. So anyway, I digress. But Madness of King George, So I saw it after the Academy Awards, and just was like, this film is bonkers good. It was
He-
so much fun.
Yeah,
And Ian Holm
is it
as the
is it Nigel Hawthorne that plays King George?
Nigel Hawthorne plays King George. I'm trying to remember Ian Holm's character.
Oscar nominated Nigel Hawthorne as King George, who was quite mad, and Ian Holm plays the doctor who's brought in to quote.
Yeah, Willis, Francis Willis. Yeah,
and does for all practical purposes. Because can you cure his madness? No. So it's an unexpected section in the film where Ian Holm arrives and takes stage, and it's harrowing and pretty horrible. But for somebody not to exist for the first almost hour of that film and then to appear, just to be able to do that alongside Nigel and to dominate him, not just in an acting sense, but the character, all of it, and then to be able to disappear back into the crowd at the end. Like it's almost like that role was written for him. It's so perfect for him. We don't get to the sense of a lot of the guy's humanity. Again, it's that you get that sense that there's a person in there somewhere, but the person's not important. It's the job at hand. Yeah. That's a very British sort of stiff upper lip philosophy of life. And that guy, is doing nothing less in his mind than saving the Kingdom of England. And there is nothing he will not do to accomplish that, even if it means torturing the king or abusing the king. It doesn't matter to him. He's saving the king. Everything he's doing is saving the kingdom. It's stunning. It's just an amazingly powerful performance. It's a big, broad theatrical movie directed by a theatrical director, but really strong stuff. And Ian is amazing in it. It's a movie that I'm always shocked that not many people have seen or heard of, because when it was out at the time, I know it wasn't seen by millions and millions of people, but it was, when you had seen it and you came across someone who had seen it, you had this connection with somebody who had this sort of profound experience. So we wholeheartedly recommend you watch Madness of King George. I
will quick say the British Film Institute voted Madness of King George the 42nd greatest British film of all time. So that should tell you. That should tell 42. You that it was up for a ton of Oscars and stuff, and it was
it's a good movie.
Yeah, it's really, really.
It's not super pleasant. There are no young lover characters in it.
It's also not devoid of humanity or anything.
No, not at all.
It's incredible. It's
not at all.
It's just this. It's a really fascinating, character analysis, of who King George was, and having it play against the backdrop of what's going on in the in the States.
It is not a psychologically sound film.
Correct.
The cure for the madness is, let's just say, you believe it because the film earns your suspension of disbelief, but it has its own kind of tragic as well. It's really interesting movie. You should check it out. Yeah, Ian is just spectacularly good in it. Hawthorne gets to play the guy who's mad, so he's the one who made the awards show circuit. But I just think in a less busy year full of awards and stuff, Ian's only ever been nominated for one Academy Award. He's been on a bunch of BAFTA lists, but
I was gonna say
only one Academy Award in it. When this is the movie that I look at where I'm like, wow, what do you got to do to get a nomination sometime? Yeah. I'd have to look at the list of nominations. I'd have to pick somebody for him to take his place, which I'm not doing right now. But to really say he should have been nominated, but I feel safe in saying I could do that and that he should have been.
Yeah, it won the BAFTA for Best Film that year.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, that's very, very English film. So
yeah. All right. So up next, we're into our final three. Which is of course not actually three, but
more like four.
Yeah, because we are going to talk. Well, before we talk about Chariots of Fire, which is a great film, let's talk about this is a film that I watched a ton when I was a kid. I'm not even entirely sure why I watched this a ton when I was a kid, but if I was ever
It was out when you were a kid, and
yeah, and it was one of those first films that we had on VHS. Yeah, I think we had taped it off of HBO on VHS, but watched Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, a ton, and I'm just pulling that movie up here.
It came out in '84, I want to say.
Yeah.
Summer of '84. I remember I was 12 in '84, and I was daytime babysitting a couple of kids across the street, and the mom was like, and they were significantly younger than me, or as a 12-year-old, I probably wouldn't have been put in charge of them, but not so young that I couldn't tell them what to do and that they could actually do it. They weren't babies.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the point is, mom was like, that Tarzan movie, that movie's not for kids. And I'm like, it's not for kids. It's brutally violent and horrific in its early going, and it's incredibly stately and boring in its last 2/3. So kids, it's got everything in it that kids hate, basically.
Yeah, it ain't Disney Tarzan.
And yet, there are those movies, we've talked about a few of them. We talked about one just a couple weeks ago, where you watch them and something about them draws you in. Mm-hmm. And this one, you and I obviously had the same experience with it. Something about it drew us in, and we got connected with it in a way we didn't really understand when we were 12 or 13, but that because we saw it when we were young, when it kind of came up again and again in the future, or the more we thought about it, when we matured as people, the better, more magical, more meaningful it became to us.
Yeah.
This is definitely a film like that. Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, for sure.
Yeah, and it's as you said, and Ian Holm plays the guy who essentially finds
he's the
Tarzan.
Is it
John.
French? He's a French or Italian? French.
Belgian. Says Belgian.
But I'm not a Frenchie. I'm a Belgie.
It's Philippe D'Arnaud.
Close.
So Belgian explorer discovered John. And he's the one
the
charged
star
with
of the movie when he shows up until when he leaves midway through the second act.
Yeah,
he's the whole shebang. So it's one of those great Ian Holm parts like that. He's not the star of the film. He's not even in the majority of the film. But the time when he's on screen, there's a lot of peril, a lot of a lot of tension, a lot of the most interesting stuff. Learning to communicate, learning how to hold a fork, all that stuff.
Yeah,
that's interesting. He's a big part of that. Their escape from Africa in the slightly longer version of. Particularly in the slightly longer version of Greystoke, the version that's out on video in most places now, it's harrowing. It's really, really exciting in an old school adventure, but not a post Indiana Jones adventure sort of way.
Right.
And he's brilliant as this quirky, weird little French guy. It's just, again, I really feel from a scripted standpoint was indeed written for him to do.
Sure, yeah.
As the same filmmakers a couple years earlier had great success together. So, which, unless you have something else to say, leads us to
which I was going to say. I mean, I'm sure he was coming. He may have even been. It was the success in his performance in Chariots of Fire. Maybe that's what started getting him parts written for him or written with him in mind.
Well, written by the same people who wrote Chariots of Fire and directed Chariots of Fire. That Greystoke's all by the same. And literally the entire cast of Chariots of Fire, but sans a couple people show up in that latter film in different sort of smaller roles. But the big money role, for my money, Tarzan. Is it Ralph Richardson that's in that one?
Yes, I believe I just
one of his last, if not his last film.
I just clicked off of it. Where are you, cast? Yes, Ralph Richardson. Yes,
Ralph Richardson's so good in it. That's a good movie. It may not be a good Tarzan movie. It treats the Edgar Rice Burroughs novels, which are very pulpy and fun, as high literature.
Yes,
and that's a weird approach to the material. And yet,
it takes the material and turns it into a very it's like a Wuthering Heights meets meets Tarzan.
Yeah,
so,
that's pretty close.
But Chariots of Fire,
but that all sprung. Greystoke's whole existence owes itself to the success of Chariots of Fire in 1981. Won the Oscar for Best Picture. It represents Ian's only Oscar-nominated role. Chariots of Fire is one of my favorite movies ever. I'm not one of the few people who thinks that was an Oscar rob of what would have been Raging Bull, I guess, 81. What's the movie that should have won that year but didn't?
Awards, where are you? Accolades.
It's not that important.
No, I got it right here. That's of course, yeah. Thanks for putting none of this in order.
That's the worst. The internet's the worst.
Yeah, it was Atlantic City, On Golden Pond, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Reds. All lost to Chariots of Fire.
Well, none of those should have beat Chariots of Fire.
Yeah.
I thought there was some sort of something hiding there, like Rocky when it beat Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like,
I think
I don't know, Taxi Driver maybe.
It was one of those occasions that was, one of those weird, rare occasions where the best director doesn't win Best Picture.
Right, because they gave it to Warren Beatty.
They gave it Warren Beatty for Reds, and then
because his movie was longer and more boring or something. Or because he was a famous actor. Who knows? Right. Reds is not better directed than Chariots of Fire, or Raiders of the Lost Ark, or Atlantic City for that matter. Reds isn't bad.
On Golden Pond was, people loved that film when it came.
Yeah, but looking back, it's not that. It's good, but it's not.
No, it's not that good. But it did win Best Actor and Best Actress. So I think that's maybe why some people think that Chariots of Fire, from certainly an American standpoint.
Still, I was expecting you to read me a movie where I was like, oh yeah, where I was going to back off a little bit. I'm not going to in this case. My favorite movie of all time, if you paid attention to the show, if you haven't, please go back and watch episodes 1 to current all again, please, because you've not been paying attention. And we're going to ask that you do that. But I was expecting, that's not exactly Best Picture material in any year. The fact that it was nominated is really cool because it's a big populist entertainment that's considered good enough to be on that list. I don't see any chance that beats On Golden Pond or Reds or Chariots of Fire for that matter. So anyway, Chariots of Fire is great. One of the things that makes it great is this, again, supporting role by Ian Holm, who appears, again, about halfway through the movie. He is a coach. He's a running coach, and the running and track and field events at the Olympics during this era, and especially in colleges, were the sports that people cared about during this time. Being the world's fastest man, breaking those records, those things were starting to be kept track of in earnest around the time of World War I. And it mattered from year to year. And England had, or the United Kingdom, I should say, had what was considered at the time the greatest collection of runners, next to probably the United States. And because they showed up at the Olympics in Paris and won a bunch of those races, it's a storied history for England. But there was a Jewish runner played by the late Ben Cross, and sometime when we talk about Chariots of Fire, we'll talk about more of this. But he feels like on his own, he's taken his running as far as he can. He gets beat by a fellow countryman, a Scotsman at the time, and it unnerves him and makes him start to give up on himself. And he goes to this coach and says, I need you to help me. I don't know how to be better. And the coach agrees. And it's controversial because the role of the amateur is considered the purity in the sport at the time. Mm-hmm. And that to be a professional runner, whatever that is, tarnishes him somewhat. And yet he fights for that and sticks up for both his coach and himself. And they have a very father-son sort of relationship Sam Musambini is the guy's name. And Ian Holm's a relatively young man in 1981, and he looks like he's 72 in this part. Without the aid of really any makeup or anything, he just has this old, super old world sort of thing about him. He's so good in it. I just don't know what to say. It's a cartoony, silly, fun role, and yet it's just such a serious. It's everything we've been talking about him on this whole list wrapped up into one part. We got a couple other movies to go, which we need to get to, but without maybe being what I think is his finest role, it's his defining role as an actor.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Chariots of Fire because you think the movie or the music is cheesy, or you think this or that or whatever, that's such a good script, such a good movie. As a sports movie, it's almost untouchable in how good it is.
Yeah.
As a movie about the class struggle and all the little things going on in England at the time, I don't know how to tell you how charming and wonderful I find it. I love it.
Yeah, I would
and
agree.
Ian's a big part of that.
Yeah, and he's one of those. He's one of those. It's kind of a it's part of that prototype of the coach figure in sports movies, that coach or that coach as father figure in sports movies. And that's it's not played any better than how Ian Holm plays it.
It's a cigar chewing 19 teens, like striped hat wearing guy.
Yep.
He's just awesome. Sam Musambini. He's just a great character, and you're rooting for him. And admittedly, the Ben Cross character, I can't remember his name, Abrams.
Yeah.
He's hard to like. He's full. He's got a huge ego, and he just but that moment he has where he's like where you can see he's on the edge of like I can't do this on my own. And when he's made to defend Sam later in the film, and the way he does it with such integrity and stuff is really wonderful.
Scipio Africanus Sam Musambini.
That's right.
I love it. That's it.
Who is it? It's John Gielgud, who's like, he's Italian. No. And what is Ben Cross said? No, he's half Syrian or whatever.
Yeah.
And Gielgud looks like he's about to throw up. It's really, I mean, it seems quaint by today's standards and racial politics. This was, like I say, this post-World War I England. So, but it's relevant. It's relevant to how we see each other and how we interact with each other today and what those prejudices are. He defends it by saying, you want to win every bit as much as I do, but you just want it with the appearance of the, simplicity of this effortlessness. And it's not effortless. It takes everything we have. And my coach understands that. And I don't care if you don't. He's kind of like, expel me, whatever you want, but I'll take the glory with me. I'll take it with me and not share it with the college at all. And you can see how the guys are not expecting this response from him at all. They're expecting a polite apology. It's Ian's not even in that scene, but he is. He's in that scene. He's hovering over it. His influence, I love it. So it's a good movie.
All right. So our next film is just the classic. I mean, a film that has come up many times on this show before. The original, the Ridley Scott Alien.
Ian Holm is so good in Alien.
As Ash, the science officer.
Everybody is really doing really good in Alien, but Ian Holm, I swear, and I don't mean this with respect to everybody in that movie, he's really helped make that thing what it was in a very true sense. He's better. He's on a whole nother level than everyone else. The way he plays this part, and spoiler alert, I guess, for Alien 1979, but he's playing what turns out to be a corporate shill for the company that's an android that's not even a person. And his otherworldliness and inhumanity throughout the early goings of that film you kind of don't know what to make of it. He's such an odd guy. Joel nailed it, and I'm glad he did early in the show. It's those layers. He's a guy who's a thing desperately pretending to be a different thing. And that both of those layers come across in every scene that he's in. Every idea he throws at that film enhances the film and its meaning, makes that twist pay off. The twist itself is a little goofy, but there's Ridley Scott makes some weird sort of erotic sort of choices late in that film in editing that the movie implies the whole time and really doesn't need to be explicit about. Ian's part of some of that, but it's such a good performance before the reveal that everything in the reveal, which is deliciously villainous, it's everything you would want it to be.
Yeah.
Works, and that's why I give it's higher, because that's an iconic film. It's a kind of amazing performance, and he's let loose. He doesn't have to hold down the fort in a believable sort of way at any point in the movie.
Right.
But just watch him every time he's on screen. He's being pretty subtle in ways that you probably had to watch the dailies to really see what he was doing. On set, you probably didn't notice a lot of it.
Right.
But in close up and in medium shots and even in the background of other people's conversations, that Ash character it truly is, creating a performance that is on an epic scale in a small, intimate setting that only enhances the film and doesn't take away from anybody else's work. It's stunning. And to me, that's the stuff of legends. If you can do that, my goodness.
Yeah, it's a really great. I mean, that we've talked about it before, how Alien is this, this really fantastic ensemble of actors, and again, you have Ian Holm, who knows how to create this incredibly electric character, and bad pun again, but
I know what you mean.
Yeah, he creates this character that your eyes go to him. You're locked in on him. You know exactly what is not that you know exactly what is happening with that character.
No, but you instantly something is not right with
and
that
yet
character.
It also serves the larger story. It's not overshadowing. It's not, what he is serving all the incredibly strong and unique choices that he's making and building this character all are at the service of the story.
He has, and who knows, he probably didn't even know if this would make the final cut or if it could be part of 100 things he did on the day. But he has this look. The camera cuts to him right when John Hurt's character is getting sick. Watch that and tell me if there is any better way to do what he does in that quick take. There isn't. It's perfect. It's exactly right in the pocket where it needs to be. Any bigger, it would be stupid. Any smaller, and you wouldn't notice it. It's exactly right. And as an emotional actor, he can be pretty amazing. But most of his career, he was asked to be a really good technical actor, and his technical acting is no better ever than it was in Alien to me, and that's why that's so high on the list. And we promise we're moving on, but Alien will get a ton of play on the show.
Alien's going to keep. Yeah, Alien keeps coming up, and there's a reason why it keeps coming up.
Because there's so many different superb elements converging.
Yeah,
and his performance is one of them.
Correct. And frankly, to be honest, it's more fun to talk about Alien than it is to talk about our number one film in this list, because this film,
which is not a fun film.
It is not a fun film. This is a kick in the gut from almost from frame one. The Sweet Hereafter. Where
The Sweet Hereafter is the story. It's a story about grief, is what it's about, and horror, sadness, depression. Even these are all things we watch in films and can be entertained by. It is really, really hard to find the entertainment value in grief. in the pain
Mm-hmm.
that is left over from something truly horrible and truly tragic. In this case, it's a school bus accident that takes almost an entire generation of young people away from the residents of this Canadian town.
Right.
Ian Holm plays ostensibly the bad guy in it. He plays this lawyer who is coming to exploit the situation for money. That is, I mean, from a movie standpoint, that's about as repugnant a person as you can possibly be. But writer-director Adam McGoyan, who's made lots of really, really interesting movies, but none that affect me quite the way that Sweet Hereafter is. It's really on a level of its own. Isn't interested in portraying, and there's no heroes and villains in the story. They're just people playing the roles that they're left with, or falling back into the habits that they have left after this horrible thing has happened to them. And he's an outsider to the situation, but he's no less a guy who's driven by the sort of I hate to just say what it is. I think a lot of people haven't seen Sweet Hereafter and need to. You need to just gear up for what is a difficult film to watch in so many ways, but it's such an incredibly rewarding cinematic experience from having endured it along with these characters who like you, don't deserve to have this story thrust upon them, and yet it is. And no more than any film I can think of do I feel that intense empathy with them, and that I just feel devastated by a human type story, a way that I feel like we need to sometimes to be woken out of our escapist slumber. Every once in a while they make a movie that does that, and this was that movie for me. And Ian's performance in it, it's not the obvious performance to call out in it. It's a weird movie where he finds himself almost the biggest star in the film, really. The next closest would probably be Bruce Greenwood, but he wasn't very famous at the time of this film. This film took him out of the kind of roles he'd been doing and propelled him into the sort of supporting heroic actor in Hollywood films that we see him doing these days. Bruce is great in it, and he'll do for what the story needs as a heroic center, but he's no hero. And Ian is the bad guy, the antagonist in the film probably, but he's no villain. He's a product of what his life experiences have brought him to be. The film demonstrates that, and you could argue even a heavy-handed way, but he plays it so believably. It's just really hard to explain until you see it. Everybody in that film is spectacular. Ian sort of leads the way.
It's I mean,
one of my favorite films of all time. I adore it, even though it's been so mean to me over the years.
I was gonna say it's hard to. I mean, it's hard to tell someone you got to see this movie. It's gonna kick your butt. You're gonna
feel horrible for weeks.
You're gonna feel horrible. Yeah. So it's hard
like these days.
Go
that
out
doesn't
and
feel
see.
like.
I remember the point I was gonna make. We're talking about this, and we're talking about there's the tragedy of it, where it's a movie dealing with grief. It's not grief in that gnashing sort of way. It's not. This is how I guess
the funeral is over.
This is how Canadians.
The headlines go away.
And then
you have to go on living. How are you going to choose to do that when it's impossible? That's what the movie's really about.
It is a dabda, the 5 stages of grief, all in all on screen, played there for all the ugliness and
the little girl from the Pied Piper story who gets left behind, as if that wasn't bad enough. The things going on in her life, played by a young Sarah Polley brilliantly. Mostly Canadian actors. And in fact, I think Ian's the only import in that film.
Sure,
A British
okay.
actor playing a Canadian. It's just amazing. It's just incredible film.
Yeah. So
And,
so that
Ian's incredible in it. He wasn't asked to do that very much. A little bit. He gets a little moment in Chariots. There's things scattered out here. He knows, he's smart. We talked to Jay a couple of weeks ago. Jay's, makes that point. You gotta recognize where the moment is before you can nail it, and then when the camera rolls, whatever mood you're in or whatever, you got to do it. This role is every bit of screen time is worthy of an actor of his caliber, and most movies just aren't like that, and so he wasn't asked to do that even often. And when the time he was in this little film that everyone agrees is nearly perfect, but that nobody can bring themselves to fully endorse full-throatedly because it's such a it's a movie. I don't want to say it like it's some sort of horror show that you survive, but it's an emotional movie. It deserves your quiet attention for a couple plus hours. So you do need to be in that sort of frame of mind, I think, when you watch it. It's not a movie I would want to be surprised by. Certainly not one I would want to be surprised by in a crowd.
Sure.
I was a little surprised by this film. I saw it in the theater by myself on a rainy afternoon, and I was just knocked out by it.
And it's important that it was raining, so the world.
It made a difference.
Yeah.
I went in, it was raining and ugly. I came out, and it was dark. It just like the whole world was conspiring to make sure that I didn't shake the experience of the film. I was in Missoula, Montana too. So
in the middle.
It's just I don't.
Yeah.
It's so good, and Ian's so good in it.
Yeah. So before we leave, Sir Ian Holm here, a couple later shout outs that didn't make the list though. We talked about The Day After Tomorrow.
He's great in The Day After Tomorrow.
Again, this little role that he gets and he not a lot of interaction, frankly, with the other characters. There's just like this trio of scientists, and it's really wonderful, and he's wonderful in it. Kafka with Jeremy.
Oh yeah, Kafka and Naked Lunch back to back.
Yeah.
Two of the weirder, most theater of the absurd films you'll ever
19.
see.
So he's
not major in either of them, but he's amazing.
Yeah,
and
I just realized it was Henry V, Hamlet, Naked Lunch, and Kafka all in a row.
Good gravy.
That's a monster,
good run.
Yeah, that's a monster run right there. And then of course, lest we forget his work in Ratatouille.
That's good. He's great in Ratatouille.
Yeah, he's great in Ratatouille. The man has been able to
and was not, Ratatouille and Day After Tomorrow, and look, they're scattered throughout. He wasn't a movie snob about the parts he took either. At all. And he brought a lot of great stuff to a bunch of silly films.
Lest we forget, I mean, he did the movie version of movie of Strangers with Candy,
right?
That weird, Stephen Colbert, Amy Sedaris stuff.
Not his finest moment as an actor.
No, not his finest moment, but
he showed up. He admired the work and showed up to have fun with those people in that kind of role, because he didn't get asked to do that very often.
So thank you, Sir Ian Holm, for this incredible body of work. Rest in power.
Movies are so much better for having had you cross their paths. We're, as always, just incredibly grateful for your work.
Yeah.
Hopefully our little list is, I think most people have seen a lot of these, but if you haven't,
especially Sweet Hereafter, if you can do it. Madness of King George is a great one that you said that surprisingly a lot of people
didn't make a big dent when it came out, even though it was fairly renowned at the time.
So so that is our fantastic countdown of the fantastic. Let's put the words in order, right, Joel?
Agree with us?
Agree with us. So
disagree with us?
So let us know. And frankly, if you have a fun Ian Holm anecdote of this guy is awesome and this is why, we want to hear about it. And of course, you can reach out to us at askjoelandryan@gmail.com. The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, and the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on YouTube, which if you are watching us right now, you are already there. Click and subscribe that. One other real quick thing. We are now finally available on some of your other favorite podcasting applications, iHeartRadio, Spotify. We'll be on Spotify for a while. Stitcher, Google Podcasts.
Oh yeah, Google Podcasts.
Yeah, so we are now available on those sites too. So if you
only fair at the end of that list to mention that we are powered by Podbean, and it is thanks to Podbean that we're being beamed out all over the world. So if you want to listen to us and you can't decide, start at least with Podbean.
Podbean has been very good to us these last 3-ish years. Don't
we have an anniversary coming up? Didn't we start this thing in October?
Somewhere around there.
Is our anniversary going to happen on the week we're taking off?
Could very well be. Yeah, next week. Whoops. We don't know if there's going to be a show next week. I am putting on a concert here in the Twin Cities. That is going to be taking up a ton of my time here in this next week.
If you want details about it, we're going to post one post only, so look for it.
Yeah,
but we're going to go ahead and post the details of that on our page this coming week, maybe even before you see this.
So if you are in the Twin Cities area, come on up to the northern suburbs and enjoy a night of, or an evening. It's just it'll be a fun hour of outdoor concerts, and you get to listen while you're sitting in your car, and that's how you'll stay safe.
It's just like drive-through, except theater style. Exactly. Musical theater.
It is like a drive-in movie. But instead you have live performers up there performing, and you get to still listen to it in your car.
In the safety of your own vehicle.
Indeed. So that'll do it for our show this week. We hope that you will join us for some upcoming very fun shows here in October. And and we will see you next time on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.